So, and thank you, Michael. Thank you for that very generous introduction. And today I'm going to talk about innovating for billions of people, billions of dollars, take your pick. I was returning my rental car after SIGGRAPH in Anaheim a couple of years ago, and I saw this very interesting poster in this tiny AV's office. And when I saw this thing that says, "Have you forgotten tapes and CDs?" Like, who carries tapes and CDs? I chuckled like you did. But then I started looking more carefully. I realized there are other parts, other things they're talking about that could also disappear. What should be the next thing that will disappear or already has disappeared that you don't worry about forgetting anymore?
Camera?
Camera is almost gone. What else?
A big cell phone.
The cell phone might disappear, yeah. The wallet, yeah, there's no reason to carry wallet. Keys, should be easy to do. What about glasses? You can actually change your displays so that the prescription is built into them, right? What else? AVIS. Why would you need AVIS when you have, self-driving cars that can come pick you up and you don't have to actually go and return a car to a particular location? What about the poster itself? So a lot of things are going to disappear, and as billions of people are coming into a new digital lifestyle, we're going to run into hilarious situations like this, right? And we live in a very confusing world because we, especially in emerging worlds, we're going to get care without building more hospital buildings. We're going to learn without constructing even more schools. We're going to get food without relying on farms, and we're going to transact in currencies that are not mandated by governments. And we can use the cliched example of how we have leapfrogged with mobile phones and completely ditched landlines. But those kind of transformations are even more prevalent in emerging worlds. So what is exciting for me is that the intersection of emerging interfaces, the topic of this class, and the emerging worlds is going to transform not only the technologies and the applications, but it's going to transform the lives of next 5 billion people. And this is a massive, massive opportunity, right? What are some things that are bubbling up? Think about the unorganized sector, the hawkers, the street vendors, the unorganized, unregulated health workers, the unregulated transportation systems. All of them are going through a digital innovation. What can we do through new interfaces there? Think about wearables. Right now we use wearables for productivity or wellness, but wearables can be used, if they're really low cost, to track attendance, to improve education systems, to track epidemics. If we use them in hospitals, can be used to see if your transportation systems are efficient, if you know how people are moving through these places, and so on. So for billions of people for them it will take too long to use a mainframe or a desktop or even a phone, they could be in a digital lifestyle by using extremely low cost wearable, like a $1 wearable. What would the world look like if we have that? Often we have systems in emerging worlds that are being built by governments that are not very savvy or businesses that are crumbling. How can we create smart objects that are self-organizing, self-correcting, self-monitoring, and that do a much better job than top-down systems? How can we have predictive health that takes care of public health issues, not by relying on very highly digitized health records or highly or well understood clinical trials or longitudinal processes, but by using data, interaction, and interfaces that people are going through every day anyway. So there's some massive opportunities we have in exploiting interfaces in emerging worlds. Now, in any society, there are people, when they're faced with problems, they'll just tolerate and get used to the misery. There are some people who will whine a lot, and we need them. And there are people who solve. Many people in these people, I'm guessing, are in the third category. And my mentor, Desh Deshpande of Deshpande Foundation, and you should really read his book and see his talks, makes a very important point. He says the progress of a given community is dependent on the ratios of the people in these categories. And most of the world, unfortunately, has people who are just used to the misery. They just tolerate. Sometimes they'll get people who actually realize the problem and start complaining about it. But very rarely do they have solvers. Now, this distribution of the type of people really challenges the way we think about how to solve problems. I mean, if you're in Boston, if you're in Bay Area, you have probably more solvers than you really want. And they're going to work on things that are not even important, but eventually they'll get to the things that matter, and they'll kind of sweep through all the problems that matter, and the society moves forward. But in the emerging world, you don't have that luxury. You have very few people who are solvers, and the solvers may not even have the resources. So we cannot copy paste the models that we have for innovation, for execution, for startups, for entrepreneurship, for venture. Those models that we have in kind of a solver-rich world are very different than they would be somewhere else. Because if you just have the same models for innovation and entrepreneurship and funding, you will see copycats of, taxi hailing services, productivity services, and so on. And we have to kind of break through this challenge and realize that the distribution is very different, and in fact come up with a completely inverted model of how we would do innovation, how would we solve massive problems, and how would we actually empower them to go ahead and solve them. And then, we are here at Stanford, at D School. I was just talking to James earlier about his class on grand challenges and the extreme affordability class. I think we're very lucky at the Media Lab or at MIT or Stanford where we have these resources. But these are just a few dozen, few hundred people going through the system. We need hundreds of thousands of solvers to go out there and get that going. So some of my colleagues at the Media Lab have started a new initiative called Emerging Worlds, and going beyond big data, Internet of Things, and thinking about newly digital citizens, we're thinking about how can we leapfrog and unleash the potential of thousands and thousands of solvers. And one case study that I'll go through a little bit later is a open co-innovation center that we have just outside Mumbai. And I'll tell you what it's not. It's not being done through contests. It's not prizology. It's not being done through hackathon, which is community building. It's not a degree program. It's not an incubator, because we're not talking about entrepreneurship and startups yet. And it's not a corporate center, right? And I'll tell you what it is. This is what it's not. Okay, so when it comes to interfaces, let's go through a few examples of how we are stuck in our thinking. Here is a slit lamp, which, to look for cataracts, cloudiness in your lens, and this device hasn't really changed in many, many years. Here's a health worker working on my eye. And here is the nurse taking picture of my retina, back of my eye. And I'm sure many of you have done this. The first time she doesn't get the picture right, what does she do? Do it again, right? She's going to try it again. But she's going to use her left hand as a mouse pointer, with my head as the mouse, and then she's going to shove it. Hopefully, my eyes align with the eyepiece right this time, and then take a picture. Now, this is a $250,000 device, and look at its interface. So this is very problematic. And to get prescription for eyeglasses, lost in a phoropter. You can write a top song about it, but for millions of people out there in the world, they're stuck and they're not getting the services because the interfaces are horrible. So a few years ago, we created this solution called iNetra, which is a mobile phone you snap into binoculars. You look through it, play a video game for about 30 seconds, and you get prescription for your eyeglasses, your nearsightedness, farsightedness, and astigmatism. And the idea there is really exploiting the interface. So, if you typically do this exam at eye doctor's office, they'll shine lasers into your eye, and you're just sitting there and things are being measured on you, or they're just asking you really dumb questions like A or B and things like that. They're not letting you control anything. They're not giving you the power to actually solve the problem for yourself. But here you can. And the reason why this was possible is, a few years ago, we heard about this so-called retina display, right? Extremely high resolution. They didn't realize that we can actually use it to test the eyes, test the retinas. A typical high-end medical device would shine a laser at the back of your eye and effectively create a beacon, a shining spot at the back of your eye, and then look at the light that's reflected from that, from that spot. And if everything is fine with your eye, this so-called Schack-Hartmann Wavefront Sensor principle through a microlens array, very much like a light field camera that you might, Lightro came out of here, so you might be familiar. It creates dots at the center of those microlens arrays, and you see these uniform dots. But if you have an aberrated eye, if you have, astigmatism or nearsightedness, then actually those rays don't come out parallel, and the wavefronts are distorted, and so the spots on the sensor get displaced. And the displacement is proportional to the local slope of the wavefront, and you can just solve the 2D Poisson equation to reconstruct, the curvature of the distortion. That's how you would prescribe glasses or contact lenses. This is a great principle, but again, very expensive, shining lasers, very high, high precision sensors, and so on. Can we do this on a mobile phone? So we're going to just do the thing exactly in reverse. We're going to create a display with array of dots and put a microlens array in front of the display. If you have a perfectly normal eye, all those points will converge to a single point. So again, on the screen, you're going to show array of dots. What you'll perceive is a single dot. But if you have a distortion in your eye and you show the dots at the center, the uniform array of dots will actually look like a jumbled collection of dots. Okay, everybody got that? And what we're going to do in software is manually shift those dots, pre-distort them, so that by disturbing those dots, you'll perceive it back down to a dot. It's like a video game you're playing. You're moving the things around till you see a single dot. And this turns out is sufficient to get prescription for your eyeglasses even better than today's medical devices, because you're doing this process yourself, as opposed to letting a device that's taking measurements while you're blinking your eye, while you're thinking about your next vacation, and kind of fading away, things like that. So the power of interaction is very, very powerful here, right? And it's not just about blurry vision. Children don't go to school because they can't see well. So you really need this thermometer for an eye, or elderly cannot do their job. That leads to illiteracy, unemployment, and lack of income. And then sometimes you just want to watch your soccer match in high def, right? These things really matter to various people. So we spun out this company a few years ago, and what's interesting from a HCI point of view is that now you would just describe it as a Oculus VR headset that can do prescription for eyeglasses, right? Because that's what it is. Snap a phone in a binocular. And it's going in the reverse, where the VR companies are working with this startup, saying about half the people who, about half the people in the world have prescription frames, and they cannot experience or enjoy VR the same way as everybody else. Because the moment you put on your prescription frames, you're messing with optics of the rest of the lenses, your field of view, your optical alignment between the three lenses, your lens of the eye, lens of the eyeglasses, and the lens of the VR display, all need to be in a single line, and that cannot be achieved. So it leads to a lot of challenges going forward. So now, now we are back to that CR problem of virtual reality and augmented reality, of how do we change the prescription inserts in these interface devices so that you don't have to wear prescription lenses anymore. Okay, what about looking at the back of the eye, right? Back of the retina. So for this, we used a technique that we're all familiar with, which is taking selfies, right? Now, why can you take selfies today and you couldn't take selfies with point and shoot cameras? What's the reason? Size is one, but point and shoot camera is also pretty simple, tiny.
The display.
The display, the feedback. The fact that I can see myself makes it very easy to decide if it's a good picture. Otherwise, I'm going to guess all the time, keep taking pictures till I get one right. So why can't we use the same principle for other complicated devices out there? What if instead of having the nurse shove my head into this eyepiece, what if I can see myself what's going on and just give me a cue of how should I align my eye so that there'll be a good selfie of my retina. That's exactly what we did in our SIGGRAPH paper. And then we have a light field display that allows you to look through it, and when you can see the display, the camera can see you. So if I can see you, you can see me. Using that principle and some other things, you can create devices that can take pictures back of your eye. And now imagine you wake up in the morning and you brush your teeth, you do an eye selfie. If you're healthy, if you have a condition, or you are prone to something specific, data goes in the cloud. We can do longitudinal analysis. We can do cross-sectional analysis for ethnicities or geographical region or lifestyles. And now we can really start talking about how interfaces and data mining can come together. I think there's a question here. Yeah.
What was your process like for finding opportunities like that? You said you had this insight about a camera and a smartphone. Then did you take that insight and just think of anything that you could, and you found out about this this retina scanner thing, or what did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, there's a matchmaking going on, right? You have a bag of tricks that you keep in mind. So next time you take a selfie, you have to really ask this question, like, why is this possible now and wasn't possible before? And then you realize, okay, these are the two tricks. One is kind of, it's a simpler device, it's thinner, and second is that you can see yourself, the feedback. And then you have those bags of tricks with you, and then when you run into problems, hopefully you run into impressive problems, not on the problems that you face on a day-to-day basis, and then you would do a matchmaking, right? But I mean, it's kind of a process of solving problems versus having solutions and finding problems to solve, right? So you kind of go back and forth between them. And then we have other interfaces where you can just drag and drop your selfies into a web browser, and it will take care of all these calculations. So it's we have a kind of a API in a web browser. So I and my group had dozens of these ideas of, hey, we can change this, we can use interface principle, we can use this other principle, and we can solve all these problems in eye diagnostics, eye care, solutions for the blind, and so on. And I mean, at the Media Lab, I'm sure the same thing here. This is my group. Everybody has a 3D printer. We have access to all the things. But rest of the world doesn't look like this, right? Where these problems actually are more prevalent. For good or bad, majority of the problems that we want to solve are actually not in Palo Alto or Cambridge. They're somewhere else. The next 5 billion people that we want to impact are not here. So we have to go out there and find those problems and have a bag of our tricks, bag of our solutions to see where it matches. So we created this platform called RedX, Rethinking Engineering, Design, and Execution. And we came up with a process that in the beginning was very very inefficient and very time consuming. But as I'll tell you, over time, it has become a very well-oiled process. And the strategy was, we had a bunch of ideas sitting in Cambridge. We approached all the major eye hospitals and Perkins School for the Blind and Mass Eye and Ear and New England College of Optometry. We brought all the experts together and said, is this important? And then we went to L.V. Prasad Eye Institute, which is the largest institute in India, and they had their experts. And we got together and we said, what are some important problems that should be solved? And we made a list, and my team and others had some solutions of how we could do it together. But if I did that in my group at one master's student or one PhD student at a time, it would take us years and years to get that out, right? Maybe 20 years to get that out. There's no point waiting. So we brought a whole bunch of people together, of course, interviewed them, found the right partners, and just unleashed them with some initial concepts of how we can solve problems for the blind, problems for low vision, problems for cataracts, problems for lazy eye, and so on. And here's a quick movie that kind of summarizes these efforts. And this has audio. And then these iterations are very tight. We have all the key players in the same place. The innovators, the patients, the doctors. And so this process was interesting because we made rapid progress. We raised a lot of cash. Donation money, foundation money started pouring in. We opened a new center in a matter of 3 months. We're up and running. And in the last 3 years, the center has produced all kinds of solutions for neonatal care to solutions for mapping, spread of eye conditions. I mean, every piece of the eye puzzle is being looked at. And now, of course, the center is getting a lot of requests to look at virtual reality and augmented reality as well. It's kind of fun. So that was interesting, and it's going very well. So we said, let's expand that a little bit and look at health in general, because kind of health and education, environment, these are massive topics when it comes to impact. And so we started looking at kind of oral health and oral cancer, sleep disorders, or challenges of the hearing, and so on. And it's been kind of an interesting process, and many of these things are coming out. Many of them fail, of course, like anything else. And then we have this series of efforts that continue to grow. Now, in all these efforts, I would say the principle is straightforward. I mean, if you think about health, we train the doctors really well first, and they use crappy instruments. And then over time, we made the instruments really, really smart so that the doctors can use them. Sometimes the instruments do such a good job that we don't even need highly trained doctors. We can use healthcare workers. But the one piece in a medical visit or a hospital that's completely underused is the patient. We do not expect any intelligence in that patient. We treat the patient as a vegetable. This is very disappointing if you're thinking about HCI, right? So what can we do to change this basic mindset and actually allow the patients? No, I'm not just talking about patient as a consumer, but patient as a producer of ideas, of interaction, and the trails. And we all like AI, but IA beats AI. Intelligence amplification beats AI. So let's have people in the loop and see how far we can go. So using this principle, my group and our classes have looked at every aspect of health tech solutions. For eyes, for ears, for infectious conditions under the skin perfusion, oral imaging, teeth, looking at infections, microfluidics, diagnostic solutions, beds, sleep apnea sensors, hydration, tremor, a whole bunch of them, right? New types of stethoscopes and so on. And we're coming at this mainly from a interface technology point of view to solve these problems. So it's been a great journey. Now, another thing I want to tell you about emerging worlds is that, in the 80s and before, it was about saving lives. How can we send vaccines, and how can we send mosquito nets, and so on. And then over the last 10 or 20 years, the world has changed, and we started saying, oh, no, those emerging worlds are really actually emerging markets of billions of people. We can sell them products. So what can we do in emerging markets in a very exploitative way? But I think we're in a third phase now, where you can think of emerging worlds as actually partners in co-innovation, if you really want to solve those problems. So, we took the next challenge, which is this festival called Kumbh Mela, and about 30 million people show up in 30 days, very close to Mumbai, and it's a very colorful festival. Very colorful, very exciting, lot of passion, goes on for about a month. I highly, highly recommend it. If you've done Burning Man, this is the next one. I was right in the middle of it. Very, very exciting. But as beautiful and as kind of spiritual as it is, it has a lot of issues. We have a city of New York appearing and disappearing in a matter of a month, right? Health, housing, payments, all these challenges. So our MIT team started working about 2 years in advance before the actual festival, which was August of 2015, about 7 months ago. And 2 years before that, we started working with the city government, with local education institutions, and a lot of corporate partners. And we said, where can we intervene and do something exciting? And we looked at some very specific verticals. It's a massive operation. There's not much we can do. And we looked at food tracks that can count people. We looked at food distribution networks. We looked at traffic jams. We looked at real-time maps that can be created out there. We looked at pop-up housing methods. We looked at logistics behind a lot of these distributions. We did epidemics by using clever forms, having a lot of manpower on the ground, crowd steering, and so on. Probably the most important thing we did was we brought a culture of innovation to this, hundreds of years of old festival, and worked very closely with the government and local businesses. And here's an example of, typically the crowds would be managed through, walkie-talkies or barricades and so on. And we use actually cell phone tower data to see how things are moving. So this is kind of the riverbed that you saw. That's where the crowds are growing as the morning progresses. This is the day of the festival, one of the important days. And here's where all the sadhus and all the priests are. So you can see them moving around. A lot of people are visiting. Here's the railway station down here. You can see people are arriving at the railway station. This is the outer parking lot where a lot of people are being dropped off and they have to walk this whole distance, which is about 7 to 10 kilometers. Our control room was right here. We were all sitting here, but of course I would make the trips. And so these were all expected, the train station, drop off, things like that. But this red spot is interesting. So, the day was very busy. Then I got a call from the city commissioner and the police commissioner. We went and we're talking to them continuously, right? And they said, we have to figure out what's going on, where people are going and why it's taking them so long. And we showed this spot to them. And actually, the reason why it's so close to me is because I was stuck here. So we woke up at, 3 a.m. in the morning, we did the trek, we stayed there, and about 1 p.m. we thought we should start coming back to look at our data some more and start making the phone calls and all these other things. But I got stuck in this circle here for a couple of hours. And that's because the way they had cordoned off the one-way streets was actually very problematic. And so we shared with them and we had a lot of discussion. But these are the kind of things we could do in near real time. Of course, this data is being transmitted to the control room and also to certain individuals in so on. So it was very exciting across various sectors. And then invited the whole city team, the mayor, the deputy mayor, the city commissioner, the police commissioner, and all the key leaders to MIT, and we spent a week after everything was over, and we had some free time to kind of exchange ideas on what can be done. And through that interaction, this was just in October, about 6 months ago. Through the interaction, actually, we were able to spin out this whole emerging worlds effort that I'm talking about. And we had some great corporate partners, and now we have a multi-million-dollar co-innovation center that's been set up in this tier 2 city of Nashik, outside Mumbai, just in a matter of 6 months. As I said, it's not a contest, because if you do a prize, then in places that are not solver rich, only the people who have nothing else to do will actually participate in those contests, not the people who are highly trained and highly motivated. It's not a hackathon, because hackathons will bring the communities together, but they don't have tools to follow up after they leave the place. It cannot be a degree program, because the incentives for a degree are very different than incentives for solving a massive problem and doing innovation and entrepreneurship. It's not an incubator accelerator, because the problems themselves are not completely well defined. The teams don't want to think about their business plan or impact plan right away, and the teams also don't want to decide amongst themselves, who's the CEO, who's the CTO, and how much equity do they have, even before they have started working on it, right? And so also not a corporate innovation center, because we actually don't know in the beginning what exactly the model would be, but these are important problems nevertheless. So the way it works is we have grand challenges that I'll describe a few of them. And then we have a 1-year internship program where this innovators, anyone of you can apply, anywhere in the world. And we have a 1-year internship program that part of the time is at this center called DISC, Digital Impact Square, and part of the time is at MIT. But only a small fraction of that will come to MIT. Most of them will actually stay in DISC. And then we have a great founding partner, which is TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, largest software company in India. And we're going through the cycles, right? And the next event is second week of July, if anybody wants to come. So it's a beautiful center, looks a little bit like Media Lab, and the colors. Sean, if you're here, you can probably recognize this place. It looks great. So that's fine. I mean, place is easy, money is easy, but what about the problems and what about the people, right? So here are a few things. I'll just give you a flavor of some of the kind of problems we're looking at, and would love to have a discussion with you. So how can we build a CAT scan machine that fits in a rickshaw or a tuk-tuk? Now, the reason why this is not possible is because a typical CAT scan machine has 15 g of acceleration, okay? Because you have things spinning. And then you have this mechanical mass of X-ray emitters and X-ray detectors that are moving as well, which means we have to solve this key problem of a system that does not have mechanical motion at all, right? And the second is one of the most expensive component of a CAT scan or X-ray machine is how you transfer the X-ray image into an optical image using scintillators. And that part is very, very expensive. So we're looking at solving these two key aspects of the problem. And if you follow a lot of the work on our website, on our group page, you'll see the kind of papers we're publishing towards this goal. In this talk, I'm mainly going to tell you kind of the grand challenges. I won't go into the algorithmic aspects of it or how we're solving, but happy to have that conversation separately, or you can go on the website.
Hey, we want to make a mobile machine that's going to fit our
Yeah, it's pretty broadly defined. Pretty broadly defined. And over the year, you'll refine it more and more.
You might have different skills that would
Absolutely.
apply to this problem.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then we don't pre-choose you. You apply to be in the program, and kind of specify 2 or 3 challenges that you think are exciting, and they kind of go through this process. We talked about how can we put prescription on the display, because it's much cheaper to create corrected displays than worry about spreading. 300 million people in India need glasses but don't wear them. So think about education, think about employment, all those challenges. And this actually worked with Gordon Wittstein, who's faculty here at EE. We have so much great information in archives, in books, but we cannot open them because they're too fragile. So imagine if you can read through a book without opening the book, page by page. And we're solving that. You cannot use X-rays, you cannot use optical wavelengths. We're solving that by using terahertz, which are about 100 micrometers or more in wavelength, close to between 100 micrometer and a millimeter. So I'll skip over this video, but here you have kind of the outlines of these pages, and the terahertz unfortunately penetrates so well through the paper that to terahertz it looks like a piece of glass. So the contrast between ink and paper is going to be minimal. And the only reflection you're going to get is because of Fresnel reflections, because of the change in refractive index of the ink and paper. But then you also have air in between that's trapped, and that destroys or at least degrades your signal, because you're going to get reflections from the air gap as well. Then Munehiko Sato and Rohan Puri, also from a group, are working on how can we use bioimpedance or bioimpedance tomography to do interactions without entering a password, because password is very challenging for many tasks in emerging worlds. And so using a bioimpedance tomography at multiple frequencies to do soft authentication. And they also have a startup in this space. 3D displays are great, but can you create Glassesfree 3D displays? And so this is Matt Hirsch. It's another spin out from my group. So in this case, these things are already out. They're creating these Glassesfree 3D displays, not by using lenticulars or diffractive techniques, but by using a series of techniques we have published in SIGGRAPH papers over the last few years that use two effectively Randomdot stereograms that are placed very close to each other. And how can you interact without cameras in a private setting? So you could be in a bathroom, but also you could be in a hospital or places like that where you don't want to put cameras, and you can interact with that. And we're doing that with radio frequencies. Now, a lot of work at UW and Dina Katabi's group at MIT has also looked at this. And so radio frequencies are becoming another powerful tool for interaction. So in this case, we can do a time-of-flight measurement through wall of human bodies. So in this case, it's a mannequin that's static, and this is a time-of-flight movie at picosecond resolution of how things are going through. So the energy hits the head and the torso and shoulders, and it all comes back. When you aggregate that, you can create very approximate 3D shapes of what's around the corner. How can you look at circulating tumor cells in a device that looks like a blood pressure cuff? And here we're using the principle of fluorescence lifetime imaging. This is still pretty far out of how can you measure the lifetime of fluorophores through scattering media. And how can you do oral imaging without X-rays? In this case, we are using the concept of an optical brush, a toothbrush where the brush is made up of optical fibers. And by sending light through the optical fibers, without knowing the actual position of the fiber ends, we can create 3D images of what's at the tip. We are able to create the intensity images of what's at the tip of those fibers. What about creating global scale information? How can we do sentiment analysis at street level, at the block level, that's accurate at a global scale? So this is work by Nikhil Naik in our group in collaboration with Professor Hidalgo, also at the Media Lab. And here we can create maps of New York cities, cities like New York City or Boston or Philadelphia, where every green dot represents a place where people feel it's safe. And a red dot is where people feel it's not safe. And all this sentiment is actually computed using Google Street View images. So there's some crowdsourcing where we have a pair of images that are being shown, and for a few tens of thousands of such images, we can learn the descriptors, the classifiers, and then we can apply that at city scale. And so tools like this are very important in emerging countries because the governments and organizations are not well equipped to do large-scale surveys and figure out what the challenges are, how interesting things are, what should be done for beautification, what the income levels are. But a lot of this information actually gleaned from just imagery. And of course, it's controversial. If you live in a green dot area, it's good. If you're in a red dot area, you should be the complainer. You should whine and go back to the city. So this can create those tools. So this brings up another point as an academic about how this work kind of plays out. Everyone knows about kind of publish or perish, and the reason we did that is because the only way we could have an impact as an academic was to publish and let the rest of the world take our ideas forward. But then the world changed, and we have good rapid prototyping tools. We have access to all kinds of resources. Now actually build a demo and show it working on 5, 10, 20 people. And the demo is your proof that what you have, your invention, your innovation, your hypothesis is actually true. So now we're in the demo or die kind of mode. But I think we're entering a third phase, which is deploy or disappear. Because the barriers to actually deploy your ideas have also come down. You of course have crowdfunding, you have abilities to work with partners all over the world. We have relatively easy access to all kinds of awards that give you additional cash. And it's also easy to collaborate with partners all over the world online. So there's no excuse not to deploy. And so I think we are even as an academic, we can't just stop at publishing. We definitely have to deploy. So at WIST and CHI, actually there are massive demo sessions, right? And you're expected to demo it if you think it's really good quality work. But I think we're going to enter the third phase very soon. All right. So in the last part of my talk, let me jump through a few challenges that are bubbling up just as a part of a conversation here. And these are created by artists at this Digital Impact Square, which just got up and running, as I said, in the last 2 to 3 months, right? And the first cohort is already there. So would imagine public transportation is a big problem, but actually in tier 2 cities, more than half the public transport is running empty. Okay, and you can probably take your guesses of why that is. The feeders are not right, and the incentives are not right. They're overcrowded in times that really matter, and so on, right? But there's no way to figure this out. There's no way to create a blueprint of this is how these things should be changed. So imagine if you can solve that. Parking is not just a Palo Alto problem, it's global. And remember, in emerging countries, parking plays a very big role in informal transportation as well, because a lot of these vehicles are actually unregulated, but transporting people. So we had to solve this problem to get people close. Crime and police is a very sensitive topic. And so in the DISC center, the way the teams are working is they actually spend time with the police commissioner. They shadow him to a lot of meetings. They go on the nice night rounds in the police jeeps. They actually have access to the prosecutors. So they're spending time, talk about need finding, they're actually spending time in these resources. This would be impossible as an academic or a startup or even a corporate entity to go figure this out. We know this is a multi-billion-dollar opportunity that can touch 1 billion lives. But to do that, we have no other framework. But here, we have an integrated ecosystem of government officials, businesses, and everything is laid out. So even if you have 1 week and you want to go and figure these things out, you can jump in and everything is planned for. So the teams are having a lot of fun and they're sharing their notes in a public domain. If you just go to the website on the Facebook page, you'll see what problems they're identifying right now that are worth working on. Institutional delivery is very critical. A large fraction of births are taking place in informal settings. That, as you can imagine, creates all kinds of health challenges. So, the rich world solution would be, let's make sure there's 100% institutional delivery. A more clever solution would be saying, no, let's go after this unregulated ASHA workers who are actually doing the delivery anyway and see how we can empower them to do a better job, right? So there's a trade-off between trying to make everything very modular and clean and the way it is here in the rich world. And this plays a role. I mean, if you take about this predictive model for health, there's health records. How are we going to get the health records? Because the doctors are overworked, the hospitals don't know how to manage their software systems. People have mobile phones, people have prescriptions written on hand pieces of paper. Can we create smart solutions that don't rely on health records? I mean, even in the US, if you go from one hospital to another, you have to carry your physical health records. So just imagine the situation at other places. Fisheries, real-time information can change that. Food, cattle, hawkers, massive problems where we have tens of millions of people in each of these professions. So let's jump into this a little bit, okay? So think about the problem with this unorganized sector of the economy, which is hawkers and street vendors. And you've seen this in many countries, right? Now, the first problem you would tackle is, let's try to identify who they are, right? That's not very good. I mean, it might increase their visibility and bring them into the system, but maybe they don't want to do it because if they get identified, they'll be in the tax net and they'll have to satisfy all the regulatory constraints. You might say, hey, listen, maybe I want to create a peer-to-peer communication and collaboration between this street vendors and hawkers because they can share best practices and have collective intelligence, collective bargaining. But they might say, you know what, we have a lot of trade secrets. I already know my cousin who does a good job for me, and I already know my friend who's been helping me. I don't want to be working with people I don't know. Why should I share with them what I know, where I get my sources from? How do I keep the police happy when they might come and stop my business? Or how might I go find my customers? You might think they should be given some kind of integrated software for transactions and tracking. And they might say, you know what, I don't have time to deal with my customers, and enter something in my phone or a tablet in a software because cash is very easy. I can do parallel transactions with 5 people while they're waiting for me. You might say, why not create, kind of Uberification, share economy, create a logistic layer? And they would say, you know what? Every minute matters, every rupee matters for us, and we just don't have time. We cannot afford a more sophisticated solution, right? So things that may seem pretty straightforward, identity, communication, logistics, actually don't work. It's a huge challenge. So to conclude, these challenges are interesting, whether it's, innovations for unorganized sector, whether how to build smart objects that overcome systems, what can we do with $1 wearables, how can we do predictive health, how can we use cameras for good. These are all interesting problems, but I'm sure many of you are just like I am, often concerned of where do I even start? Will I create something that should actually make a difference? So those of you who were old enough in the 80s probably remember this situation. The best use of a pencil was, who remembers this?
Rewind it.
To rewind the tape when it doesn't, gets tied up. So you can never know how an invention will be used in what scenario. Right? It's more important to just keep creating new ideas, new solutions, because you don't know how they will use. And so this woman, just outside Hyderabad, in India, one of our team members took this picture, and she's an entrepreneur. She's taken a technology that we use very casually, which is a weighing scale, and she has converted that into a micro business for herself, right? So people come in and they pay 10 cents or 20 cents and just get their weight, right? But she's so proud. She even has a welcome mat for her business, So I think the message for the lesson I have learned is it's more important for us to make an effort to solve these problems, whether we succeed or not, because as long as we are creating something that's impactful, powerful, there are other micro entrepreneurs that we can empower who will go and take these solutions and bring it to scale in unimaginable ways. So next time you see this sign, and you're chuckling like, what is this? Think about the other leapfrogs going on in education, in health, in transactions, in transportation, in the rest of the world, and how they're overcoming the barriers that we have faced here for the last 20, 30 years and just skipping it altogether and getting into a new world. So, whether you are at home or at work or at play, you're at a factory floor or a grocery store, I think interfaces in the emerging worlds have a huge role to play. Thank you.
We have a few minutes for questions and comments.
Yes, James.
So I'm curious about the point that you made, and I think also others in the Media Lab are making about deployment. It's something that, I kind of believe in some of my research, but it's really hard, right? And I've had a better chance of doing it when I've had a bigger organization. So when I ran a research lab for Intel, I had a lot of money that I could spend on deployment. When I'm a faculty member, with a group of graduate students who want to actually graduate in 6 or 7 years, it's much harder to think about doing any real deployments where you have to support things or get the quality to a level that's closer to commercial. And I'm wondering, what tricks and tips have you learned to do that to make it fit with the academic model where in some ways it's not your job?
Yeah. So I think the question is how do you deal with this tension between research and impact, and especially resources for the two. And as I said, for me as an academic, it's becoming more and more challenging to think in the quanta of one master's or one PhD. And so I think the world is going to change. I think the whole academic structure of getting degrees is going to change. I think right now we might be okay, but I think this whole notion that an individual should work solo on a project for multiple years is crumbling down. I think the rest of the world has moved towards a multi-person team going through very swift iterations and doing a whole bunch of things towards the given goal. And I think that aspect has to come to academia as well. As about your other point about when you have a integrated ecosystem, things can happen much faster, like the Intel lab that you ran in Washington. That's absolutely true. So, as I said, initially when we were doing this, it was very inefficient. We would have to spend a lot of time on the ground. Now we're doing something similar in Guadalajara in Mexico, also in Central Europe. So we are expanding this through MIT. and it's very inefficient in the beginning. But the beauty for any one of you in the room is now everything is set up. So now it's very easy for you to go for a week, for a month, for a year, and then everything's ready to go. On day one, you have the resources, you have all the relationships with the government, the business leaders, with hospitals, with taxi union, whoever you care about. It's all set up. And then you have people like these innovators who are in the internship program who are willing to work on those concepts as well, right? So actually, I'm on sabbatical right now from MIT and spending time in Palo Alto. So we'd love to meet you for coffee or a drink. And I'm also doing some special projects at Facebook. And so, anybody wants to apply for internships or come work with us at Facebook, please talk to your advisor and let us know. And that's an example where many organizations now are realizing that instead of doing something in a completely controlled setting inside a corporate center or an academic institution, it's actually much better to do in an open co-innovation system. I mean, it seems straightforward, pretty obvious, but people don't know where to start. And I believe we have at least the beginning of a path where it can be done very quickly, and we can do academic research as well.
So are you saying that besides people who are applying for these one-year things, are you inviting other academics?
Yes, it's completely open. The fact that we have those hundreds of people coming through, about 400 people in 1 year, coming through internships is just a piece of the puzzle. But anybody in the world can come and spend times there. Yes?
At the beginning, you mentioned the problem that there may be a large number of solvers
Yes.
in certain areas. And sometimes they're working on problems that don't necessarily matter.
Yeah.
But eventually, they hone in on the problems that do.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, do you think that there are significant challenges in the need finding process? And if any, what kind of improvements do you think can be made specific to that area, the need finding process, that can help accelerate connecting solvers to problems?
Yeah, I mean, D-School is well known for the need finding process. It's absolutely important. But often it's the challenge of out of sight, out of mind. You have to be really there to actually understand what's going on. But that's just one aspect of it. If you're there by yourself, making phone calls and showing up, it's not going to go anywhere. You need an integrated ecosystem of fellow solvers who have done some background work for you, or fellow complainers who have kind of codified or made formal their complaints, what they don't like about it. And only once they have done that, you can go in and do something about it. It's very difficult for an individual or even a small organization to go start this thing from scratch. So I was just having a conversation with James earlier about how long it takes to do the need finding. And I think that process has to change because we need these outposts to actually shorten that process. And it's the same problem with all the startups here in Bay Area or Boston, is that many of them are working on problems that are not important, but they just want to get started. And maybe the second or third startup is where they're actually going to make an impact. But it's more important to get started than be getting used to the misery or be complainers. Yes.
So I have a deployment-related question. I run a startup where we are focused on helping farmers get crop insurance using satellite imagery.
Right.
Working in Nepal and India.
Yeah.
Question is, as a startup, speed is what startup is about.
Right.
But working with government and all big bodies is like pretty slow, which could possibly kill us.
Yes.
So how do we manage that, and any thought process?
Yeah, that's exactly the problem, right? If you are education institute, you cannot do research. If you're a startup, you start for resources. If you're a corporate, people look at you in a suspicious way. If you're government, you don't have your act together. So who's going to solve it? Who's going to solve it? And that's why we need this integrated ecosystems. So if you come tomorrow to our DISC Center or the Emerging World Center and say, hey, this is the problem we want to solve, boom, all the resources will be lined up. And it's not incubator accelerators. There is no 6%, 120K, no common stock, none of that stuff, and you can just make it happen. So I think that's the power of possibly making it happen. I mean, we haven't proven mega success yet. It's all in bursts and spurts in eye care and health and crowd festivals. Our proof points are not massive, but there are some proof points along the way that it seems to work there.
One more question.
Yeah.
Question about, do you feel there's a tension between service innovation and product innovation? Because I actually work for Intel in the front end, in the market side, and there were some products that were deployed to the market, but they die after like a year or two because there's not a service that supports them.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you can put products and create demos and even deploy them as hard as they may be, but then sustaining them over time, it doesn't depend on the product anymore. It depends on the whole ecosystem, but beyond the ecosystem depends on the service, on a process that has to be robust and it has to be innovative too.
Yeah.
Do you feel that, I mean, there's enough,
I mean,
emphasis on the whole process, not just the product? Because I feel like sometimes there's too much emphasis on the product.
Yeah, I mean, broadly, the question was product versus services, and how do we take that through this process? And broadly speaking, products are usually seed based, and services are usually need based, right? So the seed versus need. And the reason why we have this 1 year process with no team formation and no need to justify the business plan, as long as it's a massive problem. And by the way, problems themselves are crafted, curated by a panel of experts and many other people. So it's that need identification, the problem identification goes through a very intense process at MIT, in other places, and so on. It's all done in a very public manner. But going back to your question about product versus services, I think if you actually had that 1 year and no pressure on defining your business plan, then you'll actually have enough time to hopefully figure out which way you should go. Because product is often a push and service is often a pull in terms of the business plan. And so hopefully that can be taken through that process. You can go to the website to see it's a lot of documents, and you can go through the website and also, by the way, startups are welcome as well to this platform, as long as you're working on a grand challenge.